Perfect. All right. So let's get started. So why are we actually here today? We're here today to learn a little bit about AI leadership and how to secure the business. So let me just go into the topic real quick. I'll tell you guys a little bit about who I am, and then we'll dive into all the things that I think are really important today with AI leadership and how to secure the actual business. So thank you for joining me today. Artificial intelligence is rapidly transforming how organizations operate, make decisions, and compete. So across nearly every industry, organizations are exploring how AI can improve productivity, automate repetitive work, and unlock new insights with data. But while AI introduces enormous opportunity, it also introduces new risk around governance, security, compliance, data protection, for example. So today we're going to explore AI leadership and how organizations can secure the business while adopting AI responsibly. So this session isn't really about whether organizations should adopt AI. That decision has already largely been made by the market. The real question leaders are facing today is how do we adopt AI safely, responsibly, and strategically? So that's exactly what we're going to explore today. So a little bit about me. Um, my name is Brian Drumheller. I live in the United States. I live in Michigan, Lansing, Michigan to be specific. I've been in IT for over 20 years now, the last couple decades, working in enterprise technology leadership roles across infrastructure, cybersecurity, enterprise systems, digital transformation initiatives, you name it. So over the years, I've had the opportunity to work on projects that sit at the intersection of technology, risk management, leadership, etc. I've just recently founded Stellarhorn Group, which is a fractional CIO consulting and IT projects organization that will be launching publicly real soon. The purpose of Stellarhorn Group is helping organizations bring that strategic technology leadership, that governance, the operational clarity into their environments, especially organizations that may not have like a full-time executive technology leader, like a startup or small, medium-sized business. In addition to that, I also host a podcast called Decline Invite, where I speak with leaders across technology, businesses, other industries about leadership and career growth and navigating the modern workplace. So one thing that I've always said is important to me is just that people first leadership philosophy. Technology does matter, but organizations ultimately succeed because of the people behind the systems. So that perspective really kind of sharpens how I approach conversations like today's topic around responsible AI leadership. So, why does the topic actually matter? Well, artificial intelligence has quickly become one of the most important conversations happening in technology leadership today. Organizations everywhere are asking similar questions. How do we adopt AI responsibly? How do we protect the actual sensitive data? How do we manage, AI risk? The inherent risk that comes with, setting up AI. How do we scale AI, safely across the enterprise? Well, from what I've often seen in organizations is a gap. AI innovation is moving extremely fast. New tools appear almost weekly, almost or daily, today. New capabilities emerge consistently, constantly. But governance frameworks and security models and leadership strategies, they're all kind of struggling to keep up with that. So the gap between innovation and oversight is kind of where the real risk begins to appear, from my opinion. So today we're going to talk about how organizations can close that actual gap. So the executive reality of AI. One of the most important things leaders can do and understand is that AI adoption often starts from the ground up. Employees experiment with tools that help them work faster. Developers are using AI coding assistants. Marketing teams are generating content. Analysts are summarizing documents using AI tools all the time. And if you want to know whether or not your organization is already using AI, ask anybody really, but ask your developers, ask your marketing teams, anybody that's sitting there, boots on the ground, probably using some form of it. So again, that answer is usually yes, they absolutely are. And leadership often finds out about that later. They might have an initiative set up, but somebody might be using their personal account, et cetera. So this phenomenon is often referred to as shadow AI. Shadow AI is not usually malicious in any kind of way. It's usually just employees trying to work more efficiently, finding creative ways to, get the work done easier, more correct, repeatable. But without the governance and visibility, it can create and introduce risk. So, the leadership challenge behind them. So, the organizations today are facing a tough balancing act. So, on one side, the business wants the benefits that AI promises, greater productivity, better decision making, automation of repetitive work, improve customer experiences. But on the other side, leadership must protect the actual organization. So when we're talking about protecting it, they got to look at things like safeguarding, sensitive data, maintaining that compliance, ensuring operational stability. The goal is not to slow innovation, but the goal is to enable innovation while managing risk responsibly. That's where strong AI leadership becomes essential. So, where is AI entering the actual enterprise? AI is entering organizations through multiple channels. Customer support teams are using AI assistants. Marketing teams are generating that campaign content. Developers are accelerating using coding tools. Operation teams are analyzing documents and data, and increasingly SaaS platforms are embedding AI directly into their products. Uh, so this means that AI adoption can spread across departments before leadership even realizes it. And when AI adoption spreads without visibility, organizations lose control over how it is used. And that's why the governance and oversight are extremely important. So let's talk about a little bit about enterprise AI architecture. So most enterprise AI systems operate across three primary layers. At the foundation, you have enterprise data. So this includes databases, data warehouses, data lakes, structured and unstructured business information, kind of the core of what AI can access. Above that sits AI models and platforms. So these are the machine learning systems that analyze the data, generate predictions or responses. And at the top of that, you have the actual applications. So these are the tools that employees or customers interact with. So when security enters into the picture here, they must exist across all three of these layers. Because if any of these layers are compromised, especially the data layer, everything built on top of that becomes vulnerable. So, going further into it, enterprise AI environments can typically be broken into those three practical layers. When we're talking about the first layer, we're usually talking about AI tools. These are the tools that the employees are directly interacting with. So, some examples of that are, generative AI assistants that are helping in writing, coding, summarizing documents, or conducting research. So these tools are often the first place that AI appears in organizations because they are easy to adopt and immediately become useful. The second layer is AI platforms. So these are the systems that are used typically by like engineers and data teams to build the actual AI capabilities. Some examples of that are typically your machine learning platforms, your model training environments, and your AI infrastructure services. And then you have your third layer, your custom AI applications. These are usually AI-powered systems embedded directly into business workflows. Some examples might include like your fraud detection engines, your recommendation systems, or your automated documented processing tools. And each of these three layers introduce different risk profiles. And leadership needs to understand where AI exists across these layers. Which brings us to our AI leadership gap. So, one of the biggest challenges organizations face today is what I call the AI leadership gap. The gap normally occurs when AI is spread across the organization faster than leadership frameworks can keep up. Employees are adopting tools, teams are launching pilot projects, departments are experimenting, but leadership itself isn't quite there yet. They don't typically have at that kind of pace or speed that I've seen is a real defined AI strategy. Governance policies themselves. What are the security standards for that kind of rapid adoption? Or do they have any kind of oversight structure? So typically, you see that leadership as is just forming a massive gap faster than they can keep up, and it's also at the same time one of the most important responsibilities for modern technology leaders. So, what would that role of AI leadership kind of be, or what would it look like? Well, AI leadership kind of needs to focus on three key responsibilities, from my opinion. The first would be the actual strategy involved. So leaders must define where AI supports the actual organization's goals. What is it that we want to do? How do we want to do it? The second, the governance. How do we define the policies and how do we define that oversight and how AI is allowed to be used, where it should be used, et cetera. And the third is a very important one that we're rapidly battling every day, security. So the AI systems introduce new attack surfaces and new data risks all the time. How are we plotting? How are we planning? How are we looking to get better in those particular areas? So when the leaders are focused on these particular areas, they create a foundation for responsible AI adoption. So that takes us into some strategy and some experiments. So most organizations today are still in the experimentation phase of AI adoption. Teams are running pilot programs. They're testing the tools. They're exploring the ideas. Uh, Experimentation is typically healthy, but experimentation alone does not produce the enterprise value. Leadership needs to transition from experiments to structured AI programs. Just turning on Copilot, for example, great. We have a tool that we can use, but Copilot turning that on without any kind of plan, oversight, governance, not quite the idea that we want to go for, not quite the value you're going to gain from something like that. Because that would take us into some of our AI threat landscapes if we just run in without any kind of a plan. This introduces things like uh, data leakage, prompt injections, model manipulations, vendor risk, and understanding those risks is the first step towards actually managing those risks. So when we're talking about turning on any kind of AI application themselves, setting that up and introducing these particular risks, it introduces a unique tool that you can use called an AI risk heat map. So when we're getting the actual heat map itself, you can use this to kind of prioritize where these particular items might fall into your kind of risk register, for example. So what it does is it measures the likelihood and the actual business impact to these particular items. And, risks that are both, highly likely and highly impactful deserve the most immediate attention, sort of like a risk register, so to speak. But this helps the leadership team actually focus on what matters most. What are the most high priority risk in the organization, especially when we're talking about AI, and what are we going to do to actually mitigate that actual risk and bring that down to some kind of acceptable level that the organization is willing to assume. So let's talk a little bit about some of these risks in detail. One of the biggest risk that I see is just the data leakage and the prompt injections. So, uh, the most common risk you see, an employee might be putting data into a Chat GPT or Claude or whatever tool that they might be using to be more efficient, or some of those items that we talked about earlier. It's not malicious. They're just unintentionally sharing information to an AI platform, not really thinking about the consequences or what can actually happen. So when they're putting that kind of information in the AI assistant, now you're starting to introduce things like prompt injections. So depending on what type of information they're sharing, this is where an attacker can actually manipulate into that actual prompt and influence the actual model behavior. So if an attacker is actually following that, scoping for that information from that organization, and then able to actually influence that, now you're talking about actually getting that into you're actually talking about getting that into now like your possible production environment and introducing just inherent risk at that point. So, when that risk highlights, this is why governance and policies and security controls need to actually evolve alongside the AI adoption. So, third party AI risk. Many AI capabilities today are delivered through vendors. You see it all the time, Copilot with Microsoft, for example, or ChatGPT or Claude. Any of these are third party vendors at this point. Um, and many of the organizations are relying on that AI API or the SaaS platform or the external AI services themselves. So when you're evaluating these actual vendors and the organizations, you should ask some very important questions, right? So like, where is our data stored? How long is it retained for? Is it used to train your models? What compliance frameworks apply to our data in this situation? So vendor governance becomes an essential part of the actual AI strategy itself. You need to be educated enough and knowledgeable enough to be able to ask these questions in order to protect your business's data at that point. So let's talk a little bit about the secure AI framework. So at this point, I've talked about kind of where AI appears in organizations and some of the risks that come from that. So the next question that leaders naturally ask is, what does a secure AI environment actually look like? So kind of one helpful way to think about that is through a framework that's kind of built on four pillars. Um, Talked about a little bit. First pillar is governance. Governance refers to the actual policies and the oversight structures and the decision-making processes that guide how AI is actually used inside the organization. That kind of answers questions like, who approves AI initiatives? What data can actually be used with the AI systems? What compliance rules apply? And who is accountable if something goes wrong? The second pillar, security architecture. So this means actually designing the AI systems in a way that includes security from the beginning rather than trying to bolt that on afterwards. The third pillar, data protection. AI systems heavily rely on data, and protecting that data is essential. So this includes things like encryption, access control, the classification of sensitive data, ensuring that information cannot be exposed through any kind of AI outputs. And the fourth pillar is kind of an overlooked one, but critical and important is how do we monitor and oversight that? So organizations need the visibility into how AI systems are used. So the monitoring itself allows the teams to detect, abnormal behavior, misuse and security incidents. So, in some kind of secure environment, I've seen some good organizations funnel all that AI traffic internally before allowing it externally, for example. So, somebody's trying to put something into their chat GPT, they have monitoring turned on, it flags it. Instantly, somebody's able to look at that and review a yes, no, kind of situation to allow that. These are kind of examples of where that monitoring and that security can come into play and help protect something that otherwise would have been exposed. So when the four pillars are actually working together, the organization can adopt AI while still maintaining control and accountability. So the AI security architecture, one of the other critical architecture points. So this refers to kind of how the security protections are built directly into the design of the system. So in AI environments, security architecture typically spans three layers. First one, data layer. We're probably all most familiar with that. This is essentially what you're putting into the prompts and what you're exposing. So though that is like your data lakes, your databases, your data pipelines, everything that you're using to supply the actual AI models. If that layer is compromised, the attackers gain access to your sensitive business information. One of the worst case scenarios. So brings us to our second model layer. This is what the machine learning models themselves use. So at this model, the organizations need to actually consider threats such as the unauthorized access to the models, or the manipulation of the training of the data itself, or any kind of attempts to influence the model behavior. So you probably heard things like the model is favoring one party over another, or they are outright rejecting somebody for ageism, et cetera. Things like that is what we want to try to guard against and make sure that that model is playing fair. And then that takes us to our third model, which is our application layer. This is where the AI is actually interacting with the business systems and the end users themselves. So the chat bots, the recommendation engines, and the document analysis tools are some examples. So that takes us to some security controls that we need to think about, and we need to make sure that are in place. We need to make sure that we have proper authentication, the proper encryption, proper monitoring, and the governance policies that must exist across all three of the layers in order to help protect a situation like that with your actual AI. So that layered approach eventually ensures that even if one part of the system is compromised, other controls can help protect that organization and now not allow it to infiltrate or flow down any further. So, going into that, let's talk about some core AI security controls. So, once an organization has designed its security architecture, the next step is implementing operational security controls. These are there are three essentially important controls that I see for AI environments. The first is your identity and access management. We lightly talked about it at a high level in the previous slides, but what that actually does is ensures that only the right people have access to these AI systems and the data that those systems actually use. It often involves something that we call role-based control, RBAC, and integration with enterprise identity systems. So, we're only allowing those that have to have access and nobody more. So it should be one of your most critical, vetting processes in order to get access to that kind of situation. Which brings us to our second point, data protection. So sensitive information should be classified, it should be encrypted, it should be restricted. so that only the authorized systems or the users that need to interact with that can access that. Just as important as your identity and your access, that you do that also for your data. And taking us down again to our third, the monitoring and the logging. So the organizations need to actually track how the AI systems are being used. So logs, right? The logs help suspicious behavior. You're able to comb through that. Use an AI tool to actually look at your logs and look at attempts like trying to extract sensitive data or abnormal usage patterns. So if you're combing that at the same time while you're also working on restricting and protecting who can access the actual data or what systems are touching what systems and what data is spread across that, that can significantly help, in your battle against the actual rapid rise of AI. So let's talk about one of my favorite things that kind of gets overlooked, the AI governance framework itself. So, in my opinion, the governance is one of the most important aspects of responsible AI adoption. So, governance can kind of sound like a abstract concept, So let's try to make it practical. So, governance is essentially the system of rules and decision-making structures that guide how technology is used in the organization itself. So, for AI governance, that typically involves several levels. At the top, you have your executive leadership. You'll often kind of see maybe your C-suite or your boards up there, and they're kind of helping maybe direct the strategic direction for AI adoption. Where does the organization want to go? What do they want to accomplish with that? And then the organizations often create AI governance committees themselves. I have seen this in multiple organizations. Having something like this is better than having nothing at all, and we're just turning things on. And typically, you see, your governance committee kind of be representatives from across the business. You typically see somebody from a technology, security, maybe your legal teams, your compliance teams, if you have them, and just leaders across the business themselves. So maybe you have a marketing individual in there, maybe you have an operations person, kind of et cetera, to help kind of guide and direct decisions. So we're not erring on the side of too secure. Obviously, we want to be secure, but we also want to actually provide value to the business at the same time. And that's where the actual business leaders can come in and help guide whatever that organizational oversight is from that committee on what they want to allow, not allow, what direction they want to head, et cetera. So their job, while they're in these kind of situations, is to actually review those AI initiatives and ensure that they actually align with the policies that are being set, as well as the risk tolerance that the business has set for the business. Takes us back to kind of that risk register. What is the actual tolerance that we have as a business collectively? What have we set aside for AI, or what have we set aside for a particular area? So finally, technology teams want to implement the actual systems and controls that actually support those policies. So without the governance, the organization's risk of deploying AI inconsistently across the departments pretty high. With governance, AI initiative can happen with a structured and responsible framework. Can be almost repeatable. It can be made sure that we're checking the boxes. Make sure that we're actually doing that in the risk tolerance level that we've actually set forth that we want out of the business itself. So, board level AI governance. Uh, when we're talking about that, we're typically seeing that as something where AI becomes more central to business operations and the governance. It increasingly extends to the board, and what the board is responsible for typically is for overseeing the strategic risk and ensuring that the organization is prepared for any major technology changes themselves. So, not to pick on any particular area, but a particular business unit wants to actually implement something they feel is groundbreaking for them or is going to take their efficiency 80% higher, and it's going to make some positions redundant, and we can better position these people in other areas of the business, et cetera, right? Well, that is all fantastic to hear, but the board actually needs to, take that into account and oversee whether or not that strategic risk, and whether or not the organization is actually prepared to absorb that. And AI is one of those challenges. So the board may ask leadership questions, such as, how is AI being used in the organization? What are we doing today versus what is it that you're proposing? What risk does it introduce? What have we measured? What kind of, data does it connect to? What kind of new platform systems, et cetera, that we need to bring in? And how are we going to protect that sensitive data? So now we're exposing it to this because we need to get another SaaS product. So how are we going to go through the routes of actually protecting that, making sure that it is secure along the way? And do we have any governance structure in place for this new idea, this new initiative, this new product, et cetera? So board level engagement kind of ensures that the AI initiatives align with the organization's strategy and the risk tolerance. So it also helps that the leadership is also thinking about AI not just as technology initiative, but also as business transformation. So both hats on there, making sure that it also applies to the business itself and where they want to head. So, might have heard this term before, responsible AI. So, responsible AI, what is that? Responsible AI refers to the ethical principles that guide how artificial intelligence is developed and used. So, most responsible AI frameworks include several key ideas. One of them is transparency. So, organizations should understand kind of how AI systems make decisions, and that better explain kind of how those decisions were made and when they were necessary. Uh, the second point that I like to make is fairness. So AI systems shouldn't introduce that bias I kind of referred to earlier or discriminate in any kind of decision-making process. Make sure the models are fair. Third, accountable. So organizations need to actually define who is responsible for the outcomes of the actual AI systems. Who is taking ownership of this particular decision, what happens when it goes wrong, etc. And the fourth is privacy and security. So, the sensitive information needs to actually be protected and used responsibly. When you're doing all of these things, you become what's known as responsible AI. So you're doing it with the best intentions, the best plans, the best foot forward. So responsible AI builds trust with customers, your regulators, employees, and your partners. When you're able to show all of these things, like a plan on a piece of paper, for example, right, or a document, a digital document, and a guide, it makes things like audits a lot easier. It makes things like compliance and legal conversations that much stronger when you're able to say we did this, or this. We're applying, for example, for ransomware insurance. That is one of the things that is getting tougher and tighter that are being regulated. When you have these kind of plans in place, it helps your argument, it helps your conversation to be successful in that kind of thing. And it helps adopt AI more widely across the actual industry itself. So, the AI leadership playbook. This is something that I strongly feel that leaders that are struggling with, how do I get there? Like these are all great ideas. What do I actually do? How do I do these things? So from what I've seen, organizations that succeed with AI are often the ones that followed a very structured playbook that they've either made themselves, adopted, tweaked, however they want to actually do it that's best for their organization. But having something to start with and follow is essential, really. I mean, the first step to doing that is defining a clear what is our AI strategy. That is a tougher question that I've seen organizations struggle with. Like they all understand they need AI, but what does AI strategy mean for their business in particular? So when they can figure that out and kind of sort through that, it should align actually with their business objectives, and it should identify where the AI can, where it can actually create the actual meaningful value for their particular organization. So having AI is one thing, but how does it create value for us? That's the ultimate goal. Um, the second step is establishing that governance structure itself. So, what does governance look like for our organization? Uh, the AI initiative should follow the consistency of policies and risk management policies that you're actually outlining in your playbook that you actually want to adopt almost every time, if not every time. Those are the things that we must have in order for an initiative to pass, and we see that it's also creating value, like, et cetera. So the third is actually creating and securing the AI systems through that architectural and operational controls. So when we're actually designing or purchasing, something that might be AI specific and might provide what we feel is value and efficiency gains, what does the architecture look like? Where is that defined? Where is that stored? At every step and every layer of this, what are the security decisions for those controls that are going to give us the best chance at being secure? And the fourth that kind of gets kind of glossed over that I've seen, educating your employees. So the employees themselves need to understand how they're supposed to be using AI responsibly, what data they can actually share, and what risks to actually avoid if they see something. We see things like, phishing test all the time for security, don't click on these links, don't do these things. That needs to kind of expand to AI, and it's not quite rapidly growing as fast as one would hope. The training behind that is a little bit lacking. So defining, hey, we know our user base best from this business, right? I work at X business. I know John, Sally, Tim, whoever, this is how they think. You need to actually make trainings that are made from around your employees and with their behaviors in mind. So when they see a situation, they know either, hey, don't do this at all, or hey, this looks weird. Let me go tell X department because I know it's defined that I should go talk to John over here in security because I see this. And that gives you a better chance at success at that point, and uh, a better outcome from your employees who are really just trying to do their job and not trying to be malicious, typically. So if you give them a better training, a better success, a better defined what they should do, in theory, it should lead to a more safer environment. So yeah, when they follow these kind of four pieces, this kind of structured model, they move away kind of from the chaotic experimentation phase, and they move more into what I see as a structured innovation environment. Um, so going into some of my more favorite slides that I made for this particular presentation, an AI control tower. This might be newer to some individuals. Maybe it's something that you've heard before. It's one of my favorite slides of the entire thing because it can kind of show you kind of where you can improve, what kind of pieces all fit together. The concept that can actually improve the AI governance itself is the AI control tower. So if you kind of imagine like an airport control tower, for example, air traffic controllers typically monitor every plane, arriving and departing. They ensure that there's safe spacing and they coordinate the movements across the airspace. And an AI control tower kind of works the same way, in a way. It provides a centralized visibility into how AI is being used across the organization. And I have a good story, I think, for this particular one. So I've kind of seen some organizations conduct, kind of internal reviews of AI usage and discover that, dozens of their AI tools were already in use across departments. Some of the teams might have been using, generative AI tools, others might have been using some AI APIs, for example, and embedding them into internal systems and platforms. And many of those happened without, centralized oversight. So the AI control tower concept kind of creates a central point to help stop those situations, because it creates that visibility and it creates the governance so that leadership can kind of see where AI is already existing in the actual environment, what data it's touching, and what risk it introduces. So, going into our AI maturity models. So, at this point of the conversation, a helpful question for leaders to ask is, where is our organization today in terms of our AI maturity? Because not every organization is starting from the same place. Most organizations are moving through several stages when adopting new technology, and AI is really no different in that regard. So, your first stage of that question would be your awareness. This is where you're actually learning about AI, what is out there, what are the things that we could actually look at and actually absorb, use, create the value. So leaders all the time are hearing about things in the news. They're seeing, their competitors maybe talking about it, and teams are beginning to explore that and kind of what it means for their industry. I can't tell you how many times that whatever the new flavor or the new article or the new whatever was heard, and a leader was, caught a piece of that, and they're able to ask me enough to say, hey, what is this? And then maybe even want to do it. And that's when we have to get into that, kind of that more awareness, maybe experiment with it in a non-production side environment, kind of get more educated about it, which takes us into experimentation. So at that point, teams are looking to run pilot projects typically, and they want employees to experiment with tools in a safe environment. And typically you see things like where developers are testing like AI assistants, or, departments are kind of creating their use cases of like, oh, I see that it's actually able to do X, Y, and Z. This is how it can apply to this particular team or this particular area of the business. And at that stage, it's actually quite healthy, if we're experimenting, because now we're creating possible use cases for that value improvement and those proficiency gains. But with that said, experimentation is not just enough. At the end of the day, we're still going to go back to this thing you're going to hear me say over and over again: governance and structure. So this is where, leadership actually needs to begin introducing, now that we've gotten the use cases, now that we've seen what kind of proficiency gains we might be able to get out of a safe experimentation. We need the actual leadership to create now the policies, the oversight, and what kind of conversations are we having around what security practices are around that AI usage now, if we want to adopt that. So organizations should ask questions like, which use cases are going to be approved out of the experimentation? What kind of data can be used with this particular AI? And who reviews the actual AI initiatives before they go into production themselves? So now we have, a decision maker of who's allowing that to go essentially live into our core products, our production models, and then what happens if something happens. Those are two different questions and two different, things that could be two different people. So it's great to have that actually oversight, governed and actually written somewhere that people can actually see at any point in time, that visibility. So the final stage of that then is the enterprise AI integration. So at that point, the AI is no longer an isolated experiment. It becomes embedded into business strategy, the operational workflows, and the decision-making processes. One of the most important roles that the leaders can play is helping that the organizations move from the actual experimentation into the structured and responsible adoption. I think that is kind of an oversight, maybe, that leaders forget sometimes, that they've done these things before. Really, there's been other technology adoptions over time. Like technology is always evolving, and they play those roles in that, and they can play a role here too. This is just one of the fastest evolving adoptions, and it's causing some panic. But when they take a step back and think about that, they can actually play the most meaningful role of AI adoption across the board. So how could they do those things? Well, they can do this with some of these tools that I've included in here, which is AI risk scoring. So when organizations begin deploying actual AI in real workflows, leadership needs a structured way to evaluate the actual risk. So one of those structured ways, the AI risk scoring. The risk scoring itself helps leaders determine how much governance and oversight a particular AI initiative requires. So typically, organizations evaluate the AI initiatives across several dimensions. The first one we typically see is the data sensitivity. So, does the AI system actually interact with public data or internet data, highly sensitive customer information, or any kind of financial information? The second point or the second dimension is the operational impact. So what happens if the AI system produces incorrect results? For example, an AI tool is summarizing meeting notes. That might carry very low risk, but an AI system making a loan approval decision carries significantly higher risk. So, what kind of ranking do I put in my organization? What do I classify as high and low, and making sure that it understands when it's labeling those things and you're scoring these things? And the third dimension is model autonomy. So, how much decision-making authority does the AI system get? How much does it have today? Is it simply providing suggestions to a human, or is it actually making the automated decisions without any kind of human oversight? So by scoring the actual AI initiatives across the three dimensions, organizations can determine which projects require stronger governance, security controls, and oversight. So this approach helps organizations scale AI responsibly without over-regulating any kind of low-risk use cases. So enterprise AI operating model. So, as AI initiatives kind of expand across organizations, leadership also needs time to define the actual operating model for AI. An operating model essentially answers this question. So, how do different parts of the organization collaborate to deliver AI capabilities? In most organizations, AI success requires coordination across several groups. First, executive leadership defines the strategy and the business priorities for AI adoption. Secondly, technology and engineering teams build the systems and models that enable the AI capabilities. Third, security and governance ensures that the AI systems comply with security policies, regulations, risk management practices. And finally, the business units. These are where the identified opportunities where AI can improve processes and create value. So without the actual operating model, AI initiatives typically become fragmented. Different departments kind of pursue their own projects with little coordination, and organizations that don't have any kind of defined clarity and whatnot. You kind of start seeing the AI shadow, IT model that kind of exists. But when organizations actually define a clear operating model, AI initiatives typically become more aligned with both the business goals and the governance standards. So, executive AI decision framework. Executives evaluating AI initiatives often face difficult decisions. There might be pressure from competitors, there might be pressure from employees who want new tools, or there might be pressure from vendors promoting new capabilities. One of the helpful ways to structure those decisions is through an actual AI decision framework. The framework encourages the leaders themselves to evaluate the actual AI initiatives across a couple key questions. The first one is, what's the strategic value? Does the initiative align with our actual business goals? Does it actually improve efficiency or customer experience or competitive positioning? The second one that I like to call out is what's the risk exposure? What new risk does the actual initiative introduce? Does it interact again with our sensitive data? Could it provide incorrect outputs to our business? And what kind of harm would it possibly introduce? The third that I think is pretty critical is what is our actual operational readiness for this particular initiative? Do we actually have the technical infrastructure or the talent and anything else that needs to possess the support that the system needs? Fourth, our data readiness. Do we actually have quality data? Do we have data that has already gone through any kind of governance and the accessibility of the data? Has it been ranked? Has it been categorized for the AI system to actually perform effectively? So when you're actually using a structured framework like this, it actually would help leadership move beyond just hype and make that actually a disciplined, strategic, AI adoption. It helps make the decisions move from opinions to actually checking boxes. It meets our criteria. So typically, you see something like an AI leadership gap itself. And we can see this kind of represented in what I like to call an AI leadership pyramid. So the pyramid kind of illustrates where many organizations currently stand in their AI journey. So at the bottom, you have the experimentations. We've kind of talked about that as we're exploring, we're running pilot programs, we're trying to figure out what the strategy could be. In the middle, you have our implementers. These are the organizations that have begun deploying AI systems in specific use cases. So you have the customer support automation or the internal productivity tools. But the governance and the strategic alignment might still be kind of evolving here. So then at the top, you get where we really want is our AI leaders themselves. Those are the organizations that are treating AI as a strategic capability. So they have all of the defined things like the governance frameworks, the security practices, and the executive oversight in place already. So, here's some questions to kind of think about when you're thinking about your business or where you're working in particular. Where do you think that your organization sits today? Are you guys experimenting? Are you implementing? Or are you truly actually leading with AI? That question can be a really powerful moment of reflection for leadership teams when they're thinking through that and they're answering those questions themselves. So going into our AI board briefing. So when AI adoption becomes significant within an organization, it often becomes a topic of discussion at the board level. Boards of directors are responsible for overseeing the actual strategic risk that is ensured within the organization and prepares them for major technology shifts. So AI is clearly one of those shifts. When boards review the AI initiative, they often focus on a few key questions again. What strategic value does it create? What risk does it introduce? Are we prepared from it from a data, a technology perspective? And do we have the governance structure in place? Again, um, do we have talent? Do we need to acquire talent? Do we need to partner with somebody? And again, these are the actual questions that help the board actually decide if the initiatives are frankly worth it. Can we do it? Is it worth it? Do we need to do things to prepare in order to actually adopt that actual initiative? So I promise there's only a couple more slides. um, when we're talking about the actual AI leadership opportunity, while much of today's conversation is focused on risk, it's also important to recognize that the enormous opportunity the AI actually presents. So we've talked about a lot of potential doom and gloom. It actually has a lot of potential, right? Organizations that adopt AI responsibly can unlock significant advantages. They can improve their operational efficiency. They can gain insights and data faster, making them faster to market on a product, for example, or beating their competitors in areas that they might be slower in. And they can automate repetitive work a lot quicker, maybe even transforming jobs from data entry, for example, into now somebody can actually learn a new skill set or help in a particular different area that creates business value at that point. And it really, helps them create new products and services. Um, So when the organizations that typically follow these kind of leadership mentalities, those are the ones that typically innovate with the governance in line. And speed alone isn't necessarily the advantage that comes into play. The responsible execution, because they have all of these governance and initiatives already documented and structured, comes into play. So the organization is actually able then to quite frankly, act with speed, but also be able to act with that safety in mind. And it produces not only some short-term gains because they're able to act with speed in mind, but they also protect themselves from unneeded risk. So when they're moving thoughtfully with the actual leadership and the governance coming into play, they gain that sustainable advantage. So one of the other tools that I really want to point out that can help adopt your maturity model, provide a more governed approach, is what I call an AI readiness scorecard. So it's a really helpful exercise for leadership teams that can evaluate their organizational's AI readiness across several dimensions. They often include, things like strategy. Do we have a clear vision for how AI supports our goals? The governance. How mature are we currently in the organization? Security. Where do we think the security falls into place? Our data readiness again. And a big one that needs to be within mind is your organizational culture. Are your employees trained to use the AI responsibly? How do they react to new tools? How do they react to change? What things do we need to do in order to get them into the right mindsets to be able to adopt what we're talking about here? So you might ask yourself, where does your organization sit with all of this today? How strongly do they sit, or how weak maybe do they sit? Where are those actual gaps? And I actually identifying those gaps is the first step towards building a more mature AI capability because it allows you to get real honest. It allows you to then have those conversations of here's where we sit today, here's where we want to get to, and what do we need to do to actually get there. So, taking me to the key takeaways from this that I'm hoping to relay here. So just a real brief summarization, AI is an enormous opportunity for organizations, of course. It also introduces new risk that needs to be managed thoroughly. Successful AI adoption requires more than just technology. It requires leadership. It requires that governance, and it requires security. And it also requires a clear strategy in how AI supports the business. So organizations that align these elements are the ones that will best position themselves to benefit while actually minimizing the actual risk. So my final thoughts, and let me leave you with just kind of one question to kind of think about here. If your board asked you tomorrow, are we prepared to scale AI responsibly across the organization? Would your leadership team, confidently say yes? If the answer is uncertain, that doesn't mean the organization is behind necessarily. It just simply means that there's an opportunity to build the frameworks that actually support responsible AI growth. And that work begins with leadership. So that's the end of my presentation. I welcome your questions and interactions. So the first question that I see are, what are the most common security risk organizations face when integrating AI into their business operations? So some of the most common things that I see are a couple of the points that I've pointed out. So, for example, what is their, access? Who has access? Do they have that defined? Is it, identified? Is it transparent that, say, security, for example, is the gatekeeper to providing access? Who signs off on the actual access? When they sign off on the access, what kind of data do they actually get? Do they have, data owners? Do they have data custodians? Do they have, are all those things aligned? Is the data, categorized? Is it combed? One of the worst things is having bad data, for example, not having proper data that has actually been sorted through. We know what that data is. We know what kind of risk that it has. We've categorized it, and we know who's responsible for it and who makes the decisions for it. Having that kind of clarity and that transparency setup is one of the harder business risk that you see in the organization, because it can be a big ask. It can be a big lift to get yourself there. So I hope that answers that question. What frameworks or best practices would you recommend for organizations that want to adopt AI securely and responsibly? Oh, well, a couple of them I've outlined here. I think just kind of measuring where you're at today, while also knowing where do you want to get to, is a good step. First, present state to future state, is a good example. But then adopting an actual framework, I think, is more important about your business. Like, what is it that your business um, how do they react? What's the culture of it? What works and what doesn't work, right? Like there typically is examples of this that you see. So you don't want to force something that you know for sure is going to be a major ask. It's really a major risk, I would call it. But what does your organization typically lean into? What do they adopt to? What is the organization acceptance rate for something like that? And I would say pick something that your organization is going to follow through with and everybody's going to want to get on board faster with, so that you can actually have success quicker but more sustainably. So I hope that kind of answers it. It's vague, but it's kind of dependent on your business itself. So how can businesses protect sensitive data when using AI tools, especially third-party AI platforms? So that is a big one, and it's probably one of the most scariest situations right now, and it is absolutely happening. I have proven this. I have done interviews for organizations, and I have given them data that probably scared them to the point where maybe I did not get that particular role, because I think some organizations aren't necessarily being honest with themselves, right? They think maybe, okay, well, we haven't pulled the trigger on AI yet, so we're okay. It's not necessarily the truth, right? Like I can go get a personal ChatGPT, Claude, any AI account and start throwing company data in there, and you would never know. And that behavior, shadow IT, quite frankly. So one of the best things that you can do is start having those conversations with your employees. That way you can adopt any kind of launch, any kind of mentality around your actual employees themselves. One of the best approaches I have seen to that so far is anything on the network itself didn't leave the network without filtering through. In this case, we called a product that we developed in house called Puddle Jumper. And what it did is it filtered all traffic into Puddle Jumper. At that point, we're talking about a really mature organization. So just kind of setting the stage here, we went through and classified documents. We went through and classified data. And we didn't let things like email get exposed if it included such keywords, et cetera. And it filtered in into a internal platform that then gave it a yes no if it deemed it no risk whatsoever, and then allowed it to get to the external pieces to allow them to get their proficiency. But let's say it's a salary document, it would say no. Quite frankly, we're not allowing that to get out. give you like a warning, just an educational warning message, so to speak. Or maybe to, hey, go talk to, Bob on the AI committee, and he can help give you some more education to you and your team about what things you can use or what methods maybe you should use for the gain you're looking to get so it doesn't expose data. Um, I think that was the last question I see so far. Anybody else have any other questions? Lovely. Well, I appreciate you guys all taking the time with me, and I hope that you learned something from this. And by all means, if anybody wants to reach out and connect, I'm more than happy to follow up with any questions that you have. Or if you see anything in your organization later and you might have an idea, for example, for a particular model that you want to talk about that might work for your company, feel free. I'm easy to find on LinkedIn. I have my email address here, and I will get them over to iExperts here so that they can be shared. And I appreciate you taking the time today. I hope you learned something. Take care, everybody.